everybody. This is going to be the second attempt at this new series called Politically Incorrect History. Perhaps I'll get canceled this time if I didn't get canceled after the first episode. I'm joined here by, the two guys that always join me on these, podcasts, Justin and Ian.
Hello, everyone.
And we are totally not talking about the Pacific War. This is completely random, and to be honest, we've all had quite a few drinks, and we just stopped watching something I guarantee no one has seen in this audience.
Like, unless you're from Canada and, 20 years ago.
And if you're like 35 years old,
35
a loser.
Years old, you'll remember this.
Yeah.
It was big on CBC back in the day.
CBC, jeez. Times have changed, but
we were history buffs back in the day, so even at a young age, so we loved this series.
For you Americans, you wouldn't have seen this, and 80% of my audience, 90% probably, is American. But it's called Canada: A People's History, and it's the history of Canada, and it's like 4 seasons long. Every episode's kind of, I guess, a decade or so or something.
It's like the pivotal moments in Canadian history, like starting off like. Samuel de Champlain landing in Quebec, it's...
Jacques Cartier first, but
Samuel de
Champlain after that.
Yeah, well, he's the one who finds Quebec and fortifies it. It's out of settlement.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to let you know I now have a Patreon account found at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel. Over there you can find exclusive Patreon episodes and podcasts based on suggestions from patrons, and other benefits like early access to all of my content, live hangouts, your name in the end credits, and much, much more. So please go check it out.
And for those of you who know me, I don't know who any of those people are. I just know there's bridges named after them.
We learned this in high school, okay? Like, it is Canadian. We're all from Quebec. So
no. You learned it in high school. I sat there and drew giant dicks on my paper because I couldn't care less.
I didn't learn this in high school. I learned it from Canada People's History before high school.
And that's a problem because I'm just going to say at the very beginning, Canada People's History is straight up propaganda. It is unbelievably biased. Like, it's hilariously biased. But the real podcast going on here is we're going to try and we've had a lot of drinks. We're going to try and explain the French-Indian War, or we'll call it the 7-Year War, or the conquest, as the French would say.
It's an idea that I've been pushing for the last few weeks.
He's been bothering us for a month.
Like, hey, let's watch Canada People's History, and then we're going to talk about the 7 Years' War. I forgot that the Canada People's History bit, it didn't encompass the entirety of the 7 Years' War.
Well, no,
it actually is a massive conflict. Some call it the First World War.
Yes, it was actually technically 23 years long. It's part of a whole other thing that we cannot get into, nor do we care. And Americans never talk about anything outside of the continent. So.
Americans know it only as the French-Indian War.
Or like the war where they kind of won. I wouldn't say you really won. The British really won.
For the Americans, it is a stepping stone to the American Revolution. For
us, it is.
For us in Canada, it's a very pivotal moment because it is the moment where Canada goes from French to British. Like, the British conquered
basically
Nouvelle France, New France.
We went from going to that kind of maybe he's bisexual, he's got a little bit of swag to him, to he's probably just gay. Going from Nouvelle France to being under British rule.
Oh,
that's just how I would summarize it.
I wonder where you're going with that.
I was going with that. But Justin is in a grumpy mood because he didn't realize we were going to show up and have to watch something that was nearly 2 hours long. Didn't realize it was that long.
We basically put him through school today.
He's angry. He drew a dick on his notes. We had a few drinks. And
it was basically we forced Justin back into grade 10 history.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way, okay? Any of you who are above the age of 30 or grew up a little bit in the 90s or early 2000s know about all those either informational videos, historical videos, instructional videos that were so popular back in the day. And yes, when the teacher rolled the TV cart into the classroom, you were excited, but at the same time, not a single goddamn person listened to them. And when you look back on them now, They're so stupid.
Yes.
If you look on the internet, there's meme after meme about these videos.
Oh my
What's
God,
the
yeah.
famous one from the buffet? The guy like slicing meat or something at the buffet, and like
yeah, he just talks to people.
it's an internet meme, honestly, because that's how bad these videos were. Well, that's what these two dickheads just forced me to watch.
He's cutting the roast beef.
So I'm not happy about it already. If you grew up on the eastern coast of Canada, this is probably one of the most important historic events we do learn about in high school.
It's the only one.
Okay?
There's nothing else.
The Battle of the Plains of Abraham is probably the most famous one, and almost any high school on the East Coast, you're going to take a field trip at some point and visit this place.
Yeah.
There's like an old castle, some cobblestone streets, and then a fucking hayfield where they apparently fought.
It's a good summary.
You can say
Yippee.
it's
Okay?
it's a changing of dynasties. Oh, you go from
Yeah,
the French
guess.
dynasty to the English dynasty, and that is how our grade 10 history class, which was Canadian history, was broken down into like the segments. Like it was, you start off as
It's
the
Nouvelle
French,
France, and
Nouvelle
then it's
France
British
segment,
and Canada.
British segment, and then Confederation Canadian.
Yeah. Confederation and actual Canada after World War II. But
Well,
again,
no, before World War II, it was 1867.
no, I mean later on when Canada is formed.
Yeah, 1867.
No, but when we get the flag and everything too, like when we're independent,
Oh,
really.
well, we changed flags.
And we're still
few
a commonwealth. Like, well, I mean, even today we're still a commonwealth. But when we were real independent, I mean, come on, like Confederation, we weren't that independent.
Okay, yeah, we weren't like the states where we.
We didn't throw
achieved
tea in the
autonomy.
water. We didn't have
We
a
didn't
hissy
achieve
fit.
autonomy right away. Yeah, we did get that. It was post World War I that we got greater autonomy. Even to this day, though, like technically, our head of
Governor
of
General.
head of state is still the Governor General.
Yeah.
Which is a proxy for.
They could dissolve our parliament. Well, they couldn't because we just would say no. But it's always there in writing that technically.
In writing, yes. You know,
We're getting off tangent here, okay? Because this is going way too long.
Well, anyways, just to say, I didn't give a fuck in high school, and I don't really give a fuck now.
Show them.
I'm
your
just
notes.
hoping.
Show them your notes.
I'm just hoping. I already did. If you were paying attention, I'm hoping that in his wild rambling, Ian will answer 3 questions for me in this stupid thing, because I did take a few crib notes. But question number 1 is why it's called the 7 Years' War if it only lasted 4 fucking years. Because this documentary they showed was from like 55 to 59.
I was answering that earlier, and Justin got upset and threw his notes everywhere.
Question number 2 is, again, I don't know who the names of all these general and people are, but if this is the most famous Battle of Quebec City, why did they name all the towns next to where we live after these people and not all the towns in fucking Quebec City? Because there's 20 generals here, Vaudreuil,
Quebec
and
City,
Montcalm,
Quebec City
and
was
fucking
established.
Repentigny, and all these people who bridges are named after. Everything around where
Quebec
we
City
live
was already
is
established
named
at the
after
time.
these people.
Yeah, but
And where the actual battles happened, nothing is named after.
he has a point. Those places weren't expanded upon then. They are now, so they were named after those people. But in like where Quebec City was, like most of those places were named.
Now that was the metropolis of New France.
Like Montreal
It
is
was still
nothing
small.
back then, almost.
It was the side capital. It was the second city of Nouvelle France, but they really didn't have. Well, they had Trois-Rivières as well, but even that was a minor. What we consider a city. Like these are towns. Basically large towns.
Not important.
And my third question is obviously, yes, we find out in the video that we were running out of supplies and troops and we would have lost a war of attrition eventually. But why would anybody who's behind a fortified fortress just decide, hey, we're going to walk out and fight the people and just lose everything?
We'll get into that later.
We should get there.
Okay, because you
I'm
bring up a
laying
good
out
point.
the 3 questions that I want answered, okay, fuckhead?
We'll get
So,
to it. Yeah, for sure.
That's
I'm
pretty
excited.
much it.
I'm
Yeah,
excited.
I think
There you go.
the first question is why is there a war in the first place? And I mean, there's 100 answers because this was a world conflict.
They wanted to put in.
I-
That's the answer to that.
The greatest part about this Canada People's History video is a certain gentleman that everyone knows. A Mr. Is he a Sir? Sir Benjamin Franklin? Or
at some point. I'm
Because
sure.
I know, like, before the American Revolution, he wasn't in the good graces.
I mean, he was a
of
turncoat.
the-
Like, anyway,
I
yeah,
know.
he was probably Benjamin
So
Franklin.
this video starts off with Benjamin Franklin giving like a narration,
let's
his
explain.
personal account.
Canada People's History, the way that they do it, it's a documentary style. They show you reenactments, but then they have people playing the actual characters in front of the camera. And in this series, it's rather hilarious, but they've got a guy playing Benjamin Franklin, and he's kind of like Hitler. And he shows up at the very beginning, basically coming up with a rationale for why Britain would invade what is Canada.
Before that, we should explain. Okay, the two, because they basically are polar opposites of like societies. The French Nouvelle France, New France, has a population of little under 80,000.
It's like they got 60,000
very,
troops.
very rural, agrarian, spread out society, but they also have the largest
Amount of
borders.
native allies.
They have the largest border in North America at the time. They have the most landmass in their possession that under their
At
flag.
this time, yeah.
Whereas the English, the population of the colonies, the 13
It's like 2
colonies at
million.
the time, they're like 2 million plus, and they're just breeding rapidly like rabbits.
My audience is
But
like
they're
90% American. They know.
They're very city oriented and almost industrial, whereas the French are like New France. The whole purpose of New France was to get
Just make money off the fur trade, yeah.
Make money off the fur trade, send that wealth back to France. France never gave a shit about the colony itself. It was it was a money project.
Yeah, so here, just to explain the audience, because 90% of the audience is American, they already know this.
If you can see the map, the French kind of cut North America in half, going through the Ohio Valley.
Yeah.
They haven't really settled it, but it is their possession. And the English are locked in on the east coast of the States. And they want to expand. Their population is booming. And so our good friend Benjamin Franklin, if you want to give...
So, just to summarize what Ian's saying, basically Nouvelle France owns a vast swath of land, north of what is Canada, but also in the interior of what is the current day United States. And the Americans, or the British colonists, they are literally stuck on the coastline going all the way down to where Florida is. They have no more room to move. So they have this actor playing Benjamin Franklin making the argument that because they don't have any more room, they basically can't populate anymore. And he says something along the lines of, they're basically killing our children before they're even born.
If I may be allowed the expression,
It's so ridiculous.
killing our children before they're even born. Like, essentially, he believes the French are strangling the English colony by not giving them the room to expand into Ohio. And for
It's all about Ohio
anyone
for Americans,
who's not aware, the English and French have been on and off warring against each other for the last...
Well, it's actually their
few
native
hundred.
allies. Their native allies are pitting them against each other. That's something that this show, by the way, the Canada's People History, this episode barely talked about the natives. And I just want to say, the natives were so active in this, they were playing both sides of the fence. So the strategy of, like, let's say the Iroquois Confederacy was, they didn't have any loyalty to either side, despite what most history books were telling you, like, I don't know, 30 years ago, if you read the shit. What they did was, whoever was looking like they were winning at the time, they would just trade with them so that there wouldn't be any, bad things coming their way. But they would just change with the wind, and they would always pit the French and the British against each other because, hell, it made sure that they weren't coming after their land, so that they had somewhere to hunt. And that all comes to an end after this war, because once the British have basically a stake over the entire continent on the east side, then the natives can't play anybody against each other, and unfortunately, they get wiped out because of it. Because until then, it was pretty good for them. And under the French, a lot of people make this kind of stupid summarization, you probably heard it, that the French colonists were very nice or gentle with the natives, and that the British were harsh to them and all this. The truth is, there was barely any French. The French couldn't really colonize an entire village or do anything. So they were only there to make fur, so they barely could enforce any brutality upon the natives. The British were there, like there's 2 million of them. They could do what they want. So if the French had the same numbers, the French would have done terrible shit to the natives.
The French were very good proponents of trade alliances with the various.
Yeah, but it was a necessity because of their numbers. They couldn't just.
It ensured their own survival because in the beginning, when France was colonizing New France, yeah, they were absolutely at odds with the natives. There were massacres very frequently, and so the only way of survival was find native allies
and learn how to work with them.
Yeah, how to work with them, how to become like them, like live on the land.
Here's another good example. Justin is from Dutch ancestry. I recently found out when you showed that pile of documentations that your family goes back to the 17th century or something like that.
Like the 1400s, I think.
Yeah,
everybody's family goes back to the 1400s.
Everyone's family does go back somewhere.
Everybody's family goes back to the beginning at some point.
But he has written documentation of like how far it goes back from Holland.
I have some research, but it's again, you're talking like 3 generations back before anybody even set foot in.
Before the British got any relationship with most of these Aboriginal groups, like it was the Dutch that was actually over here. The British they took out the Dutch in a few wars.
New York was originally Dutch.
Yeah, exactly. The Dutch were the stranglehold in the early days, but the British defeated them in some wars, not even on that continent, in Europe. And they inherited all of these kind of trade agreements that they had with, let's say, the Mohawk tribes.
New Amsterdam, that's what it was.
Yeah, New Amsterdam's place.
Yeah.
So the Dutch were in an identical situation to the French, because you'll hear that too. Oh, the Dutch were pretty good to the natives. It's just because they didn't have great numbers. If you're in small numbers, you're facing 2 million natives. You're gonna have to play ball.
If you pose
either way, they were trading like a rusty spoon for like who knows how much. Like
that's over. I think that's oversimplified. The whole. We can't get into it. I studied that in university. I did do a lot of Aboriginal history. And the trade thing, like the idea that, like a few beads were traded for this territory, it's not exactly like
also,
that.
The slave trade was pretty...
Let me put it this way.
I'm not talking like slave trade.
I'm sure it was exaggerated.
It was exaggerated.
But if you're telling me that it was fair towards the natives, I highly doubt it.
No, because they always make
That's what I'm saying.
They make it look like the natives have this plot of land over here, and they're like, oh yeah, give us those beads and we'll give you that. No, usually the natives are like, you want that territory that this other group that isn't us is hunting on right now? Who fucking cares? Yeah, go take it, you know? Like they're just selling other people's land, but they didn't understand the concept that
of territory.
I don't get to use the land that I just sold. That didn't. They had no recognition of that. You know, they didn't own land. They just they hunted in an area. There's less deer over there, so they moved somewhere else to go hunt.
But when the deer come back there, that's when conflict starts.
And then when you show back up to your old hunting grounds from 10 years ago, and it's just a bunch of villagers, and there's like stuff up, you're like, oh, well, what the hell's going on, right?
They say possession is 9/10 of the law, but at the time, like in native society, like the most important possessions were their slaves, and because they were absolutely taking slaves from other tribes.
So, we need to summarize.
Actually, let's get started on
7 Year War. Problems are British and the colonies. They want to expand. They want to go west, but they can't.
Ohio.
They need the Ohio Valley.
It's like Hitler, and he needed
the Sudetenland.
The Sudetenland.
Although he didn't really need it, but this is different. But Benjamin Franklin, he's kind of like Hitler in this, and he makes these excuses. And I'm sure it's politically incorrect to say that. Young George Washington started this whole thing, but I would argue he did.
Okay, so it's kind of like open to interpretation. Like in Canada, people's history, they kind of loosely said it was the French. But, the French retaliated because the English started pushing into Ohio. And, how did the French react? They go to their native allies and they start raiding English settlers.
People,
the settlers who are moving into Ohio illegally.
So, for American audiences, illegals is a very popular word right now. We're crossing over a border where there were no walls.
Not yet.
No walls. The French did not put up walls. They weren't smart. And the illegals, who are you guys in this circumstance, came into our territory illegally, and we evicted you. And you are the aggressor.
Served notice. Get off our land. Yeah. And so in retaliation, the Americans send Colonel Washington with his contingent, and they massacred the not regiment. There was a unit of, I believe, like the first engagement between the English and the French. There was the French force and there were only like 30 or 40 people,
Yeah, it
and
was
the
small.
English came in. There were like a couple hundred, but they surrounded the French, and there was a breakdown in communication between the two. The French were surrendering.
No. This is propaganda. There's no breakdown. George Washington allowed this to happen. Okay, you can't bring this up until you talk about what happened to George Washington in his youth. He was captured by the French, and they treated him well, and they stopped Native allies from killing him. When the same circumstance that we're talking about right now, when George Washington had some Native allies and they captured some French, he literally, there's all these stories that, he turned his eye for a second, and they were all just all of a sudden scalped. No, George Washington let them scalp those French, and there was no war crimes back then, but it was not honorable.
They were all massacred, and this is after, the officers of both sides had their peace negotiation and terms settled, and then all of a sudden,
Exactly. And for all you Americans listening right now, I am going to throw fire at George Washington for this one. It's great what he did in the Revolutionary War. Very badass. Hell of a general. But this shit, when he was in his youth, this is some dishonorable coward-ass shit. And it ain't sliding by.
Anyone who's seen
we are getting some hate mail from the USA after
I think this is the last episode of this show.
Anyone who's seen the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Oh my god, yes.
And in the film, they talk about Mel Gibson in the French-Indian War.
Yeah.
This is where his character was fighting in the Ohio
He's
Valley.
a swamp fox.
Yeah, he's because there was a lot of guerrilla fighting from both sides, and Mel Gibson was one of those, scalpers.
Well, his character was actually an evil son of a bitch who did a lot of terrible shit to a lot of people.
It's ironic, I know why they did it. Okay, like,
well, they couldn't portray him.
He was. They were in South Carolina, and his slaves are free.
Yeah, he's a good slave owner.
I doubt that.
Have you seen The Patriot?
Probably like 25 years ago.
Mel Gibson plays a slave owner.
Of course, they're all the nicest slave owners.
No, but they're painting the British as evil because the British show up on his villa, and it's like under the British rule now, all slaves are made free, and then
so it's like we are free.
Master made us free a while ago. And,
well, wasn't it?
And
I think it was on Rogan's podcast, or somebody was talking about how everybody has that ideal that, if I was alive in the 1700s or whatever, I would have been the nice slave owner.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, get the fuck out of here. You're all full of shit.
No, everyone, you're products of your time. And, back to the Second War.
Okay.
So,
we're in Ohio. It's tensions.
We're not in Ohio. We're in Montreal. Can you make up your mind?
We're actually in Ohio for this at the moment. But okay, so
way to dox me, and I live in a remote area, asshole. Well, if someone kills me, or I'll just say it right now, I do not want to kill myself. I am not suicidal.
This took a dark turn.
Anyway,
okay, we're in Ohio. Tensions are rising. Both sides are technically fighting, and
skirmishing.
But what's most important is what's happening in Europe,
which we don't care about as
it doesn't really matter because the 7 Years' War, it's happening on many different continents.
It's a world
and
war.
It really is a very broad.
So there's
subject.
war in Africa, in India, all across the European continent.
I forget what's the triggering thing. It's
numerous things.
It's not what happens in North America that triggers the 7 Years' War. War is inevitable between England and France at this point, and let's just say the war erupts, but there is already hostilities on the North American continent.
So all you need to know is outside of this conflict on the continent that matters, the British and French are fighting in the European continent, and the French do not give a fuck about
They're
Quebec.
fighting in Africa.
So the French don't care about this continent. The British just happen to have a navy so they can move troops if they want to.
The British do care because they do want the colonists to expand out.
Well, they have 2 million people.
Actually, it's one of the triggering things for the American Revolution is the American people believe, if we win this war, we're going to get Ohio. And
they don't.
England kind of leads it that way.
Britain, by the way, Britain respects the law, the treaties they do with the natives, that they won't be expanding into the Ohio Valley. And, then the American Revolution happens and all gets
but that's a whole different chapter.
But like that's another thing. But we're slowly dipping our fingers into a war because this isn't like a spontaneous war where suddenly armies mobilize and they start charging. It really started off as raids, and then eventually we see real commanders.
Militias and stuff. Because both sides, they don't have their forces in North America in bulk at this point. Yeah,
but
they have their garrisons basically.
And this is a war that, like, there are numerous battles, but kind of the most important thing is there's these predominant forts that, if held, they don't allow access to certain river routes to the enemies. We'll call it headquarters and stuff. But do you remember the story of Braddock pretty well?
Not really.
But the most famous, like when Americans or when Americans or Canadians hear about this war, they usually start with General Braddock and like how he fails. He bites off more than he can chew in this little battle that he does, and it's a big shock to the British to lose. Because for the most part, at the beginning of this war, the French are miraculously winning, given the fact that they have like a population of 60,000 versus 2 million. It's pretty impressive that they're winning.
They made great use of their native allies.
At the beginning,
and they also adopted similar tactics of hit and run, guerrilla fighting. It wasn't the predominant like line warfare, mass armies meeting on a field and exchanging volley fire and whatnot. Like a lot of it was fought in the forests up until this point. Sieging a fort.
I mean, win or lose, you can't tell me historically when you have a defending force that's fortified. Doesn't matter if it's on a riverfront, on a hill, or in a fucking ditch. When you have a defending force that's fortified and you're attacking to try and take it, when does the attacking side ever take less losses? It's almost impossible.
Usually when the reinforcements come in for the defending.
That's what I'm saying.
It's
when you're attacking, you're always going to lose more. You're always going to need more.
What was the battle with Julius Caesar when he was sieging Vercingetorix, and then Vercingetorix's reinforcements came in and then ended up sieging Caesar? And so it was like
he was besieging a town, and then he made a siege line around himself. That is what you want to
avoid when you're sieging someone is, their reinforcements coming in and then sieging yourself. So you want to get it over with.
If you're like Justin, to answer Justin's question, if you were besieging a place like Quebec City, for example, the only thing that can save the people under the siege is if reinforcements from the outside come over. So typically, the person who is on the outside only ever loses when someone rescues them.
Yeah, the point is to sit there and hold out until somebody comes down.
Exactly, yeah.
I know. That's what I'm saying. So, it's a big numbers difference, but obviously you're going to lose more when you're attacking anyways. You're going to lose the first few battles. When you're landing troops, you're going to lose more. It's just rule of thumb in
warfare is a 3-to-1 scale. If you're attacking, you should have 3 times the numbers as the person defending under any circumstance.
It's not true. In Axis and Allies, you take the 50-50 every single time.
Well, that's Axis and Allies, baby.
Every single time you take the 50-50.
And if the dice doesn't go your way,
just shit never does.
Reload the
autosave. Oh my god.
No, we've never.
Cheating bastards.
So, for the British, the Braddock expedition, in which George Washington was one of his aides, mind you, it's a very famous disaster. The British are shocked at how much they lose, and they lose because the French are using guerrilla warfare with their native allies. So Braddock shows up, he does the old traditional line, and he just gets massacred because in the forest there are a bunch of people shooting at him. And that's kind of, I guess that's like the first big battle, or notable battle.
Yeah, I suppose so.
In 1755,
it does escalate quickly.
That escalated quite quickly.
From 55 to 58, most of it is fought in the interior, as it's called, Ohio interior, off of a little bit into the 13 colonies itself. The French send over a general. What's his
Who's that?
General Louis de Montcalm.
Yes.
To lead the French forces, and he's a bigwig European general, and he's bringing European tactics and strategy, but he's also bringing European weaponry. as well.
We need to set up the stage here because
I
I think
jumped
by the end of
Because
this podcast,
there's a lot that's going to happen to this point, so I was just
I have a huge
leaning it
bone.
more to the Canadian side.
I have a huge bone to pick with the source material that we were just watching. So, this Canadian People's History portrays two characters improperly, and it's propaganda, in my opinion. But what you hear in our high school education, a French general, Montcalm, is sent over. He's fought European wars. He's very disappointed to be sent to this theater because it's really beneath anybody.
It's the backwoods.
Yeah,
Like, really,
this is a loser job.
This is the new world, and it was considered a disappointing post.
Yeah, this is not protect the castle. This is go protect the woodshed out back.
Yeah.
Exactly. He is we're going to say that he's a professional soldier. He's fought professional battles amongst formidable forces. And there's a certain way that
Gentlemanly warfare.
Anyone who's seen any movies set in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, the guys line up, they shoot, they do their volleys. It's that style European warfare. There's protocols, there's white gloves, there's the handing of the sword, all that. In Canada, at this time, as the Americans and Canadians, we have native allies. There's more of a guerrilla warfare, more of a militia thing going on. My American audience, you'll love this. You guys love your Revolutionary War, your militias, and how you outdid the British by fighting on terms they didn't understand. Us Canadians, or the Quebecois, it was the same thing.
Just to be fair for a moment, just so there's no confusion. At the time, the population of New France, they were known as les Canadiens.
Yes.
It translated to Canadians. There was no Quebecois.
Yeah,
or
no,
anything like
there
that.
don't exist.
They-
Yeah.
The population of New France was just known as like
If
translated.
it's New France, why are they not?
So that's why we're-
It makes no sense.
I mean,
Because
that's why we're
they've
calling
been a
them
few
Canadians
generations.
here.
They've been a few generations there, so we have another character, and there's going to be two characters. There's Governor Vaudreuil. So he's the governor of Nouvelle-France at the time, and he's born on the continent, unlike Montcalm. He understands how things are done on this continent. He understands guerrilla warfare. He understands how the natives work. They have a certain way of doing things, and then all of a sudden, this big wig guy shows up who's going to lead the forces, and they really butt heads. They do not like each other, these two guys.
He's one of the three that's technically in control of the colony, because the French are under a seigneurial system at the time. That there was basically three people in control. You had the governor, you had the clergy,
Yes.
head of the clergy, and the third one was something. I forget the term. It was basically like minister of industry, minister of labor, or something, and he was responsible for overseeing.
Trade minister, some kind of thing.
Essentially that. He was responsible to...
It's kind of like a Hudson Bay deal.
It's like he's in charge of the economics of the colony.
But
Whereas
the militia is under
the governor is the overall in control of the day-to-day and everything going on in the colony.
So what we'll get into this later with the Plains of Abraham. That's at the very end of this. But this series, Canada's People History, it's for Canadians, and they portray Vaudreuil to be like godly and an angel, and Montcalm is literally the devil.
This is a fair point that. So Vaudreuil, as a Canadian, he believes in Canada first and everything, and it's not fair that France is sending a general over to take command of all the French forces in the colony.
So this is going to get confusing for the Americans.
That there's Canadian and French, and there is a distinction between the two.
We need
Canadian
to distinguish
is the population of New France.
The people who
but
live
they're
there.
citizens of the Empire of France.
The people who live there, who make up the militias, we'll just call them the Canadians at this point.
Absolutely.
And then there are literal European Frenchmen who were brought over with Montcalm, and he receives very few reinforcements, but a few. He only wants to use professional European soldiers to fight European-style warfare, in lines, doing volleys and that. Whereas Vaudreuil is like, we have a ton of native allies.
You don't understand what it's like over here. This is how war is done.
If anybody's seen The Last of the Mohican, it does a decent job showing kind of it portrays Montcalm rightfully as he doesn't like the idea of using natives. He sees them as being savages, to use basically the French term.
A tool,
he doesn't want to use them. He thinks they're brutal. He thinks it's disgusting to use them. He doesn't like the militias either. He thinks they're just a rabble of useless idiots. He doesn't want unprofessional men. But this Canada's People History show, they take it to the next level, and they make it seem like everything that goes wrong is simply because of Montcalm's attitude. That's not the case. It is true, everything they say about Montcalm. He didn't like natives. He didn't like the militias. He always butt heads with Vaudreuil.
Yeah.
But Vaudreuil, in my opinion, makes one egregious mistake that cost Nouvelle-France.
And it was petty and spiteful.
Well,
We'll get into it later.
Yeah.
Let's get into two things. One, from what we have seen and will see, New France would have been lost anyways.
Yes.
But two, let's be
Yeah.
fair. The French, Canadian, Quebecer, whatever you want to call them, with the chip on their shoulder, butting heads with these snooty, overzealous
Exactly.
Frenchmen
That's a great
is
way
a
to put
trend
it.
that is continued
Well,
to this very
That's
day
that's
and will continue to the end of existence.
that's actually a remarkable way of putting it.
very
yeah.
much
It's
as
taking
the
to-
Americans with the British and anybody with their original colonizers. The same thing.
It's taking today's biases and placing it upon a historic period.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can tell there's a narrative. Montcalm, bad, dumb. He's the reason why Nouvelle-France failed. He's the reason why the British win, which is
Why
like
does everybody
What?
always blame France on lost wars? I'm just saying.
But he actually,
Yeah.
he I'm not going to claim genius, but he was a proficient commander.
he didn't do a terrible job.
Like the beginning of the war and for most of the war, because the war ends like almost like that in North America.
It's
but
very
up until that point, Montcalm was dominating the battlefield in North America.
But here, let's kind of explain the battlefield a little bit. So we have all these raids and skirmishes. The French are winning what is minor
The
battles,
Frontier War is kind of.
but the French are not on the offensive here. It's completely the British who are on the offensive. The British are the ones trying to
They
go
have to.
north to take over what is modern day Quebec. But in order to be able to get at like the hinterland or our HQ, let's call it Quebec City, or to a lesser extent
Montreal and Quebec City,
Yeah.
those are
the
like,
most
the-
important
the,
places.
The two big cities in New France, and the only cities
There's nothing
have-
else. Fuck it.
being in control of those two, basically.
Well, what are they going to
control
do? They're going to take Point de
everything.
Cascade. Like, there's nothing else. But in order to get here, it's not a matter of just walking up. That isn't how things are done. It's river units.
But also, if you're aware of Canadian terrain, and especially like the Adirondacks and that area, like New York into Canada, it's very overgrown. It's a lot of forest. There's a lot of rivers and creeks. It's not easy to navigate.
It's
And
really
this
just
becomes very contentious, like throughout history between the English and the French, like and later on Americans and the British. It's a hard nut to crack to get into Canada.
well, actually, it's not the terrain. It's natives.
And well,
It's if you
Using-
walk up, natives will
using
kill
your
you.
terrain to its greatest advantage, and
They can't physically just walk up because the natives and the militiamen would just pick them off because it would take months of campaigning. What they have to do is they need to go up riverways, but in this time period, your defenses were forts. And the Nouvelle-France, just like the Americans would have had, sorry, I keep calling them Americans, but the British would have had, they have forts.
well, they
at the
were
mouths.
the American colonists.
The American colonists, they have forts at the mouths of main rivers that basically thwart anybody who tries to get by. And there's a few forts that Nouvelle-France has that basically keeps them at bay for the early half of the war.
Yeah.
Do you want to recount some of these battles? Like,
I'm not overly familiar with like what happens in the last Mohican. Like I know that's a very
well,
prominent
that's
battle. I know
Fort
you're
William.
more.
Well, that was a
you're more
siege.
familiar with
That
it.
was a siege in which there was native allies on both sides, and basically some natives
And
were.
Daniel Day-Lewis, don't forget.
Well,
that.
Daniel Day-Lewis was a big part of it. Basically, the natives were playing both sides, trying to see who was going to win. At first, it really seemed like the French were dominating, but some of the natives got wise to it. It's the Iroquois Confederacy, and they figured, no, we should toss our line in with the British. As soon as they turn over to the other side, the British finally they defeat this one fort, and it basically opens up one of the river pathways to go further north. But there's still other more significant forts.
Mhm.
But that's one of the big victories for the British. Yeah.
Well, getting into the overall strategy of the English know the only way to defeat the French in North America, they need to reach their prime objective, and the prime objective is Quebec City.
Yeah.
So going by land is overly difficult. It's not going to be feasible. It's not possible. So what's their next resort? Well, England at the time does have the largest navy in the world, and under suggestion of and they're going to be known as the Boston A. Well, actually, we missed a very important.
Oh, you want to talk about Acadia?
Oh, I want to talk about Acadia.
No one cares about the
I
Acadians.
do. So okay, in the previous war between the English and the French, France sold out Nova Scotia, known as Acadia.
France sold out Nova Scotia. Okay, yeah.
They basically gave it up to
Yeah.
the English, and things were going well up until that point. But as war is breaking out, the English went to the Acadians under a suggestion from the Boston A, as they're known. And these are a group of Boston merchants that coveted land in Canada. And okay, Acadia is part of English territory at this point. I wanted to make this point because
Show the audience.
the British basically give the Acadians a choice. You go become Protestant and swear allegiance to the king, or go somewhere else. But you can't go to New France. We'll send you to Louisiana or back to France. And so Acadia, also known as Nova Scotia now, the Acadians get kicked out. And this is where, and we can track it back. My family, the Schofields, they
Oh my God! you really
they landed Nova Scotia a year after that, and that's where my family started in Canada.
You know, if only that one.
So the whole reason you wanted to do this podcast was to put a little 10-second anecdote
My
that
family
your
came over
family
to
won
Nova
this battle,
Scotia.
apparently.
Oh wait, let me. Sorry.
But
My
okay,
family came to Nova Scotia.
but okay, going back to Nova Scotia, because
God.
there is a very important thing in Nova Scotia, and it's the northern coast of Nova Scotia on Cape Breton, and it's called Fort Louisbourg.
Yes.
And basically, Fort Louisbourg is the strongest citadel in North America at the time.
And it's holding
It's
everything.
an absolute beast. And so if you look at the map, it is on the tip of the St. Lawrence. So in order to control the St. Lawrence, you have to control Louisbourg. So the English want to get to Quebec City. They can't do it by land. They have to go by sea. In order to go to Quebec City by sea, they first have to go past Louisbourg. So that's like the first real major siege along the lines of the prime
So,
objective.
Basically, there are small other battles being happened in in the interior, but in order to actually attack Quebec City, they need to take this fort first, and then we're introduced to the big figure for the British military. Although he's young at this point.
He is, yeah. I don't believe he has the rank of. I think he's just a brigadier general.
He's still breastfeeding. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure.
he's like brigadier general. He just got his commission, sent from England, but he's in command of the force to take Louisbourg.
You can-
And you introduce
And doesn't he get fucked at his first shot at it, or?
He does. So it's General Wolfe.
Yeah, which becomes a big name.
Well, he's not a general at this point, but yeah. So Wolfe, he tries. It's a pretty daring one. He tries to scale it, I think.
Like
It's an amphibious,
at
and then
first
scale.
he does like a marine landing with his troops from his ships, and it was unsuccessful. It was basically like a massacre. But at this time, he also has troops coming in, a lot of American militias
Yes.
coming north and into Nova Scotia at this time, and they siege it from both sides, from the water and from the land, and that was too much. They basically starved Louisbourg.
Mm-hmm.
But in this propaganda video that we just watched, oh boy, at least them in Louisbourg, they had the governor's wife.
Oh my God! Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk about this. So they go on this tangent that like the French are suffering within this fort, and the governor's wife goes up every morning.
Every morning, it shoots the first 3 cannons.
She lights the
to
3
rally the
cannons,
troops.
and like this rallies everybody's morale, which is like one of the weirdest things.
And they're all starving and being bombarded constantly
Yeah.
from all sides.
They all died because he probably just had no more grain to make bread. Because that's all these people ate was bread.
And it's not just the fort, Louisbourg. Like, Louisbourg was, like, in an essence, like, it's almost like a small city. Like, this is
Yes.
a massive citadel. It's
Well, it's a military town. You would call it like a
It-
military town.
I wouldn't say military town. It's a fortress. It's a citadel. It's
Well, it's a point of entry into the country too.
Yeah, it controls the waterway.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's move past that a little bit.
Did you have some of your famous notes to go by?
Well, I'm just reading because
The ones with a penis all over them. You're right. It's just like a high school student. He starts scribbling text while we're watching this.
Well, yeah, I mean,
What's that scene in Superbad? It's just like
Oh
I used to draw dicks.
it's again, we're going back to just how bad some of these videos and these productions were, where the acting is so over the top. Like,
except for Benjamin Franklin, whoever the guy that played that.
I would go to say the acting
If
in
I
like
made the
70s
lobby
porn is better than in this thing.
True. Ron Jeremy could have pulled off a French officer.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, Season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it. Without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software, and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/The Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
Bro, put the white wig on him, he would have...
Actually, his facial hair would have worked.
And especially, we'll get later to exactly what line he could have said perfectly well.
Yes.
Okay?
That's a
So
good one.
we'll get back to that later.
Wait,
But please continue it so we can finish this before.
So Louis, let's just jump past. Louisburg capitulates eventually. Like their writing was on the wall. They couldn't survive a siege from both from water and.
They get surrounded and starved out.
So now the English are able to move on, but it happened too late. Winter is coming.
Yeah.
So they
White Walkers spring up out of northern Canada.
How did I know you were going to put a Game of Thrones
You can't move in winter. Like
So they have to wait till spring. And meanwhile, in the winter and that, there's all these guerrilla wars. And there's a lot happening in the interior as well.
Yeah.
But we're moving to like the pivotal stuff. So it's spring 1959, and now the English Armada is ready to move. And
it was a working
I
note.
must note
my
the
notes
power of the English Armada. It was like 30 ships on the line, 30 frigates, something like 90 transports.
Versus
vessels.
0 for
Those
the
are all
French.
boats.
France does not have a navy in North America here.
Well, not in North America. They did have a navy.
Yeah, they had a navy, but they didn't send anything to North America
No,
because
not a single boat.
they really didn't care that much.
So-
Like, when Montcalm was asking for reinforcements for France, he was given, I think, the apex of French strength in North America. They were like 12,000, something like that, which is like peanuts when you're fighting a force that has a population of 2 million. You know. But so anyways,
Well,
the English,
a professional army, because
the English in contention, they send 1/4 of their entire navy.
This is over 200 ships.
This is a navy that spans the entire globe. They send 1/4 of it with one objective in mind: take Quebec City.
Yeah.
And this fleet, it outnumbers the entire population of Quebec City. It's almost half the population of the entirety of New France. That's how large this fleet is, and the
overwhelming numbers.
Yeah.
But in a siege, that still doesn't matter.
because Quebec City is a very fortified city.
Yes.
That's why Quebec City was chosen in the first place as where Nouvelle-France would make its banner.
And I'll just say this is kind of a sideline thing, but for any Americans, if for some reason you'd actually come and visit Quebec, might
It's a beautiful place.
I dissuade you from the obvious choice of going to Montreal? Because
Quebec City has so much more charm.
Quebec City, you're gonna get treated a lot better. They'll
Yes.
speak English to you, by the way.
Yeah.
They're fully bilingual, unlike Montreal is bilingual, but you'll be treated like shit.
Most of it is English architecture at this point, but there is a lot left.
Fort
of
Frontenac
the
is
old-
changed,
The, the old city, there is still a lot of French
But
construction there.
you're gonna get better beaver tails. You're gonna get better
Oh,
pizza in Quebec
Everything's
City.
better.
Better breakfast. The breakfast in Quebec
Yeah.
City is better than Montreal.
It's a much
eggs and bacon.
Hey,
it's
hey,
the
it's a
same
much more
shit.
it's a much more beautiful
Oh,
place
fuck.
to tour.
Hey, and we just had to bring we had two Dutch visitors come over from overseas, and we had to bring them to like Mount Royal. We only got halfway up, and we just like said, "Oh fuck it, let's get out
Well,
of here."
they came in February. What
I
do
know
you
it
want?
sucked. Why would you come in February to this godless land? Do not come here.
But it was also like the most beautiful February we've had on record.
It wasn't bad. Anyways, back to the point.
Okay,
So this armada has shown up,
shown up to Quebec City.
waving their dicks around. They're saying, "Oh, it's the times are over."
Immediately they start bombarding Quebec City, and that's how are we going to crack this nut? Well, across from Quebec City, there's another island, and it's called Ile d'Orly, and that's where the English drop a lot of their soldiers and a lot of their artillery emplacements. And from there, they just start shelling the shit out of Quebec City, and this is just continuous day and night.
Which is not
Shelling.
This is pretty much our version of USA versus Cuba, just looking at each other across the water going, okay.
pretty much. There's no progress. Like the Fort Frontenac and all that is impenetrable.
It's come time for Wolfe to make a move for Quebec City. He's got to.
Well, he needs to
so
make
that island. He can't go from the island to Quebec City. That's just a siege point, like where he can hit it with cannons.
By the
But
way,
in
I
order
love
to hit Quebec City, he's got to land his troops somewhere. Sorry.
By the way, I love the caveat that they put in this documentary, where in the middle of all this, they're like, "Oh, by the way, Wolf's like dying of AIDS and reading poetry because he thinks."
Can we talk about the mob thing too?
But like in the middle of this, they're just like, "Yeah, by the way, he's dying and like reading poetry and trying to like
And talking.
live out the rest of his life." Meanwhile, he still fights the entire rest of the fucking conflict, and like
So Montcalm, they paint him as a character.
it's like Doc Holliday in Tombstone. You know, he's like dead in a hospital bed, and then all of a sudden he shows up and saves the day. Like, how does that make any fucking
Montcalm
sense?
is a professional soldier. He loves war, but he finds it insulting that he's been posted in New France, and all he wants to do is go back and be with his wife. And like the primary sources of Wolfe, it's a lot of letters sent off to his mom.
It's
and
only
like,
to his mom. Okay, like
only
bring that
to his
up.
mom.
Does he have a wife?
No, he doesn't.
No,
Well, exactly. So who the fuck's he gonna write
He's
to?
married to his mother. His mom
He's
lost
basically-
her husband, so
he's
he's
like a super mama's boy, and you bring it up like he's got AIDS, well, he's got tuberculosis.
he doesn't have AIDS.
He's got space AIDS, you know.
But he's
Gonorrhea,
okay,
syphilis.
here, I'm going to set it up for my Pacific War fans. This is General MacArthur, man. He's a mama's boy. I guess she must have been a helicopter mom. Because this guy wrote too many letters to his mom, and he's talking about, I don't want to be in the military anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to put any more angst on you, mother.
His late father bought him the commission. And,
Yeah. And well, I mean, you can don't go into it too much, but you can explain that, you know, if your relative, like your dad, got in.
Oh, the commission system. So, it wasn't like officers in the army at the time was not merit based. You had to purchase a commission to become an officer.
You're an NGO.
If you were from a wealthy family or not, they would purchase their child a commission, and the more you could spend, the higher the position. So you could purchase somebody a general commission.
Yeah.
And so a lot of like military leaders were from prominent wealthy families, even though they had no.
Here, I give money, you general, you go die. Thank you very much.
But he
no
was
business
coerced
being in there. And so Wolfe never really wanted to be in the military. He's coerced by.
He's coerced by the fact that his father basically started the train that went
now
there.
he's on the other side of the world fighting in
a useless war
outside Quebec City, and all he wants to do is get home, back to his mom. And
well, he's still breastfeeding, clearly. And he's missing his mom, and apparently
he's dying.
I'm just saying,
he's dying for that breast.
Her husband is dead, and now he's talking about how like he has to quit to be around her because like she's living in angst. It's
kind of weird.
This is some Macbeth shit going on here. It's a little weird.
Also written by an Englishman, so fair.
Yeah. And then he goes into and then he's reading poetry while he has AIDS apparently.
His gay AIDS slam poetry.
I don't know what the fuck we're going with that.
I know.
But so eventually
he needs to land.
All I'm saying is they reference that like in the middle of the story.
Yeah, it's
as if he was just gonna die off and never fight again.
Out of nowhere.
It's so dumb.
And it's right before like what's about to
happen.
happen.
And then it's right before he's like, okay, I'm gonna fight and win a war now.
His first landing outside of Quebec City, it's a little bit to the east of it, up on the St. Lawrence, and it's the Montmorency Falls. This is a great tourist area, by the way, guys. They do fireworks there in the summer, and it's the acoustics from it bounce off of the waterfalls.
Did you lose your virginity there or something? Like, we didn't keep talking about this.
That would actually be magical.
What was his name?
Magical. You just used the word magical.
His name was Jean-Guy.
So anyways, that is his first landing, and so actually they weren't his Marines, but like this is
Marine war. This is an amphibious assault.
It's an amphibious landing.
Yeah.
So he lands his troops from his ships onto the beaches around the falls, but the French have been entrenched there for years. They're ready for this, and it's an absolute massacre.
Yeah, it's really bad one too.
The English, like, they lose like 90%. He doesn't send his entire force. He only sends like 1,000 at a time, but they absolutely...
Well, this is standard practice. You send a small force to make a beachhead, just like U.S. Marines on an island in the Pacific.
But like there was no beachhead to be made. Like it was just they were slaughtered.
They
walked into a bear trap and got fucked.
Well, they had the high ground too. I mean, they had the water.
So that didn't work. Wolfe pulls back onto his ship, and everyone.
He cries to his mom more.
He cries to his mom more. His underlings, his other generals, are starting to contemplate that he is not the leader that to lead him to victory. And there's
and in this age,
a chance for mutiny.
In this age,
so Wolfe,
if you could have taken him down,
absolutely. So Wolfe knows time is of the essence. He has to make a big move. Yeah. Everyone is predicting that he's going to, this time, go west of Quebec City and land like 20 miles outside of the city, where it's a little less fortified. One day, Wolfe is from Ile-Dorine. He's gauging the coastline of Quebec City, and he just happens to spot a narrow path. Just like, I can't believe no one seen it. They call it a goat path, and like in the story of 300, a goat path can change the fortunes of a battle. Yeah. So he spots it, and he immediately informs everyone that's where we're landing. And he starts, and this is where it's important, he starts the landing in the middle of the night.
But the show doesn't talk about it.
It doesn't mention that he starts his landing.
Do you know why? Why do they not mention any of the movement of the boats? It has to do with Vaudreuil. Governor Vaudreuil was responsible for a significant portion of the troops. He was further away from Quebec City.
Yeah, he
watching
He
the
had
coast.
1/3 of all available French troops under his direct command.
And he was watching the coastlines under orders from Montcalm because they had no idea where they were going to land.
Yeah, they knew he was going to land somewhere.
And they were supposed to converge once they figured out where they were landing.
that was the plan, yeah.
Now, what the fucking Canada's People's History, you idiots, you made this, I'm just saying, don't talk about
And throw somebody else under the bus, not Vaudreuil.
what they, and they don't ever talk about Vaudreuil. They use one of his underlings about this. But
Yeah.
what they failed to mention is Wolfe, he has a brilliant maneuver. He takes a bunch of empty boats and he moves them somewhere down the river to make it seem like he might be landing somewhere else. It's just what you would call like a decoy.
Yeah.
It ends up being a double fake. He is trying to get the French to believe he's going somewhere where he is not, and it's Vaudreuil who falls for this. Vaudreuil ends up keeping his unit somewhere because he believes that's actually where they're going to land. And he has a significant amount of the French forces.
He's got about 3,000 under his control.
Montcalm doesn't have to worry about this because he's close to Quebec City, and that's where they're coming anyways.
He's garrisoned in Quebec City. He has his forces spread out a little bit, but still able to converge anywhere in that vicinity fairly fast.
Now, what the fucking show we watched glosses over, I forget, do you remember the name of, they give a different name, it's someone working, Boucherville, is it?
Yeah, either Boucherville or...
Is it Bougainville?
No, it was Boucherville or it was this other fucker. I wrote it somewhere, actually. Repentigny.
I don't think it was Repentigny, but
It was him or Boucherville, one of the two.
Boucherville. They give another name who must have been someone working for Vaudreuil, which is hilarious to cover from. But what ends up happening is when the units do land near Montcalm, Montcalm has standing orders for Vaudreuil to bring the units to where the battle is, but Vaudreuil intentionally took it upon himself to keep the units where they were because he still believed that it was a double fake and that the British were secretly landing larger amount of forces somewhere else than where they had landed to fight
But
Montcalm.
also, from Wolfe's plan, and this is the genius of it, he started the landing in the middle of the night.
Yes.
So, imagine poor visibility and everything. Majority of the English landed in the middle of the night,
Yes.
and they took to the field.
But then the boats went over. Yeah.
In the early morning, the French noticed the English, oh my God, they're actually already here. Like, how did they even get here? Like, where did they land? Like, they didn't realize there was that path in, and they used the cover of darkness to actually get their forces on land. So now they're late on reacting. Montcalm sends
Before we get into the battle, I just want to point out because this is the end. This is the end story for Vaudreuil. Yeah. At this point, the British have now placed all of their units in basically one area.
They're starting to form up.
Yeah,
they've landed. That's the important thing. They landed in the cover of darkness, and now they have all morning to deploy themselves.
We'll get into the battle. It's important,
which no one thought was possible. Wherever they land, the French, and this is what had been working to them up to this point, that they could converge and defeat the landing.
But further down the river is going to be Vaudreuil with his dick in his hand, and he's going to sit there the entire battle. It is only at the end when he actually tries to send forces over. He literally went outside of his own jurisdiction, and he said, no, we're not going to move the troops over to what he thought was a lesser battle, even though the commander of the French forces is fighting like the real battle. It was pretty obvious. And
it was not a fake.
I'm just going to say, because what happens in the Plains of Abraham, it's what ends the war effectively. I mean, there are battles afterwards. But Vaudreuil single-handedly lost the war, in my opinion.
It is speculated that if Montcalm had access to those additional 3,000 troops, he would have won.
Well, that's part of the question I was just going to ask, but I'm also going to talk a little bit myself, because it's the only thing I can take from all this. First of all is, would the two of them have succeeded in winning that, considering you guys say they were so badly outnumbered?
No, together for this battle they weren't outnumbered, actually.
Well, what Montcalm shows up with versus...
I'm just talking about 200 ships, quarter of the British fleet against whatever the fuck's...
Yeah, but what lands is...
obviously
it's only a portion of it.
Yeah. But the other thing I'm going to say is, we were talking about before, obviously in this old school warfare, whoever has the defensive position and is trenched in and is set up first has an advantage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
we talked about this a little bit before we started. regardless of your opinions of, well, if Montcalm had just fortified, they would have lost anyways through attrition and whatever, because he wasn't getting reinforcements from France, because France didn't give a fuck. That's fine. You can argue that they'd lose at a later date.
Yeah.
But still, if you know you're outnumbered, and yes, they've established a beachhead and a position now and whatever, and you're eventually going to get
Well, the French
surrounded, but
outnumbered the
why in the fucking hell would you leave the fortification of Quebec City or Chateau Frontenac or any of that to go and fight this head on when you know
you're giving them time to,
when you know they're dug in?
Yeah,
but you dig in your fucking castle and let them come at you.
as soon as possible because you're giving them time to put more troops on the.
No, this is very simple. The only way to get any supplies at that point into Quebec City was by the sea. The British controlled the sea. As soon as the British surround the land, there's no more. The siege is over. You wait a few months, you starve out. What the idea of a bridgehead is, you have to get a small amount of strong units in, so like a few thousand, to try and hold something until the
Land everybody
else. But the French are not going to let them do that, so you have to attack as fast as possible to dislodge the enemy from the bridgehead. And if you attack somebody who has their back to the water, they have very little options.
Nowhere to go. So
fair point, but I mean, it's like
even without Vaudreuil, Montcalm could have won this fucking battle.
He did, and the forces of Montcalm had on. He outnumbered. It was.
They had 4,000. Montcalm had 5.
Yeah, he did. He outnumbered him, not by a lot, but enough.
No, but like you know what this means.
The English had all the time in the twilight and early morning to deploy themselves on the plains of Abraham, and the French had to react and march towards it. If the French had stayed in Quebec City, the English had their position, but then the English would have kept landing more, and eventually it just would have been untenable that the French would not be able to knock them
the
out.
English are going to take heavy casualties, and it gives you more time
to
maybe get reinforcements from France and convince them that, hey, this is a position where
it wasn't coming. And also, like, getting your reinforcements from France.
Even if you can hold out for 6 months or a year, the war in Europe can change, and everything can change.
It's a 4-week journey.
It's roughly 7,000 against 4,000, although about almost 3,000 of those French are not like regulars. We're talking militiamen.
Yeah.
But that makes it. There is a difference because a professional soldier is gonna.
Because this to me makes me. You know what this makes me think of? Remember the stupid Brad Pitt Troy movie?
Yeah.
Where he's standing outside of the castle yelling for Eric Bana to come down, and then he kills him.
But, okay,
stay in the fucking castle, Eric Bana.
Yeah, but they'll
shoot him with an arrow.
If somebody's screaming Hector enough,
they don't.
You can want to
They don't show it in the film.
And yes, I'm not talking about the Trojan
horse. The siege of Troy is 10 years long, and the fight between Hector and Achilles happens on like year 10.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
It was a stagnant war.
If you sit in the fucking castle, you can drag it out for a long ass time.
Maybe shows Mr. Orlando Bloom, you over here. You're like, oh, I'm just Paris. I just want to make peace and love and time on my castle. Hector was a man, and he went out and he fought freaking Brad Pitt.
And he died like an idiot.
Yeah, well, Brad Pitt had that secret maneuver no one thought of, where you jump up to a side dash.
Jump side dash to the neck.
Which he blocked twice. It didn't work, so.
That movie was hilarious.
Well, the airplanes flying in the background, the watches made it really great.
Out of the whole story, and not the film, but I do love Hector. Like, I do not like Achilles. Achilles is like born because he's a demigod, so it's not fair.
And then his cousin gets killed because
his cousin / lover is.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Probably, yeah.
But my point is just like at some point,
all boys love.
Okay, you fucked up. They
landed.
I'm sorry.
If you can go at
Justin
them,
and I work for Greece.
If you can go at them while they're landing and stop that, of course. But you fucked up. You missed it. They landed. Oops. Now you've lost your advantage. So fucking.
You're doing such an honor to the Quebecois to compare the siege of Quebec City to fucking Troy. We're talking about a bunch of toothless guys.
But that's what I was going to say. Speaking of comparisons, Helen of Troy launched 1,000 ships. All of Quebec launched 200. So this girl's top game must have been really, really good to get 5 times as many ships as our entire fucking province.
Well,
I'm
the
just
feet
saying.
are wide, you know what they say. This,
Also, for American listeners, the Fide Wa, that's basically what Nouvelle France populated its colony
and it's
with.
not true,
And
no,
they're-
they weren't
The
prostitutes.
whores of the king.
They weren't prostitutes. That's just a myth.
They were just.
I don't even know what they're talking
They were
about.
just
prostitutes.
widows and like women who had minor like fucking grievances.
Disfigurements? Oh.
Like they weren't actually prostitutes. I don't know. Like it's a myth. You know it's a myth, right?
I don't know.
It's true. They were not prostitutes.
I don't know. We'll call them Mythbusters.
Okay, so
we really got off point.
stupid move by Wonka.
To answer
Very
your
stupid.
question, no, he did absolutely the proper thing because
Yeah.
time was on England's side.
Time is
The longer England had, their forces got stronger. Their position got stronger, whereas the French position got weaker. So it was advantageous for Montcalm to strike as soon as he could.
If he could win, yes.
There-
If
he
you can't
just-
win, it's pointless.
the long-
Because you just lose
But
another spot.
he would have lost worse.
To prove a point,
And
just-
also, it prevents the fighting from happening inside the city. And for anyone schooled in,
I'm just saying, Greg, it's not worth to attack all
What
the
happens when
turn
you-
two if you know you're going to lose.
no one's gonna get that
what
reference.
happens when a city is under siege and sacked?
You got that reference.
horrific,
That's all that
and
matters.
they were trying to avoid that.
What happens when you don't attack a beachhead is what happened to Africa and India when the British did that. So yeah, no, you should attack immediately once they start landing. So Montcalm did the right maneuver.
Yeah, but that's my point. They didn't. They were already landed.
But also under
And fortified and trenched in.
Okay, Montcalm
I mean,
wanted his
half a day.
reinforcements. Montcalm wanted his reinforcements to come in from Vaudreuil, another it was 2,000 to 3,000 extra troops. That was like his guarantee of victory. And from what he witnessed of the British landings, he had the advantage. He could win this battle, and anyone looking at it would agree. Yes, the English landed in the night, and they used the morning to deploy themselves, but they were still outnumbered. And to Montcalm, professional soldier, everything was on his side.
Okay.
But he was not anticipating the strategy that Wolfe had employed. And I'm sure many of the listeners have heard of the film, another Pacific film, The Thin Red Line.
Yeah.
Well, this is where this term comes from. It's this battle, in fact. The British Redcoats outnumbered, but Wolfe wanted them to have the most devastating first volley. Because at this time, line warfare was decided by volleys. And whoever had the most devastating volley, yes, you killed the most troops, but it also fucks with their mind. It's psychological warfare. When you see everyone around you just drop and you're all shoulder to shoulder.
When you're
just
actually,
drops behind you.
as one soldier in the reenactment things in the show said, when you're not erect. When you can't maintain your erectness.
When you can't.
That was in
You
another
could-
battle.
You could hardly stand erect.
He said that's
Just
so
saying,
it was a different battle. It was a different battle.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he made a point of
But
saying,
yes.
but you cannot
But
remain
some
erect.
people are so freaking war hungry. Yeah, they're erect. all
So
battle.
just to set this up for you people, how bad this stupid documentary is. It's an account from some 17-year-old soldier that nobody's ever heard of, and he's talking about some siege in the forest
He lost his
where
boner.
he basically got annihilated, and they were taking crossfire from everywhere. But instead of saying we had to hide behind trees or we had to dig
We
into
couldn't
trenches,
stand up straight.
he used the exact words. It was near impossible for a soldier to stand erect without being hit by bullets.
Literally word for word what Justin just said.
Yeah.
This was it.
It's just we're mid drinking, we're idiots. It was pretty
Which
funny.
is why I suggested this. I thought it would be fun.
We gotta finish
This is the type of things
going
that they have you
Going back to
watching.
Plains of Abraham, so I feel like I've been saying this for 20 minutes. Wolfe deployed throughout the night. He deployed his troops into what was called the Thin Red Line, and it was 2 ranks deep. So literally one soldier and one behind, and then he spread that out as wide as possible. Whereas the French were coming at him, and they were in classic French fashion, like they were something like 20 ranks deep.
Yeah.
But this thin red line, this massive red line, was waiting, and they were not moving. They were waiting for the French to come
Is this
in.
where Red Rover comes from? The game we used to play in the 90s?
Possible. I mean, actually similar.
So
I see the similarities. So the French, they start their advance. They start off with their artillery, and because this is, artillery starts.
You gotta stop for a second here. The whole point of the thin red line, what is actually terrifying about this is it's one of the biggest gambles that you could have done in warfare, because if you have all of your men in one line,
They can crumble.
that means that they could all be hit in the first volley, but on the other side, it's a double-edged sword. If they are not hit, every single one of them in the first volley gets to shoot. Because in traditional warfare,
it's essentially a glass cannon.
It's a glass cannon for those who play like PvPM, PvE shit.
So the French come in and artillery is firing back. The French are the first ones to order open fire the first volley. The French do so, and they're like 100 or so meters out. And at this time, that's too far to be effective. Few shots hit the English. The French start reloading and walking towards the English again. This time, the English are ready. They wait for the French to come into closer range. The French stop and they're about to take their volley. The English are waiting. Wolfe orders.
But he has how many bullets in the chamber?
Oh,
balls kind
so
of.
this is another thing. He orders his soldiers to load 2 musket balls rather than 1 in the chamber.
So it's a double glass cannon
with a little bit extra black powder to give it its. Another thing about having 2 is they become extremely inaccurate.
Yeah, but you're
they'll rattle on the way out, hit each other, but basically you're shooting twice.
Yeah,
and you have everyone spread out. Mm-hmm. So essentially, it's just a giant shotgun blast. So his first volley that he orders, the English load up, and that is his entirety of his troops fire, because the French are coming in and they're 20 ranks deep. They outnumber him, but only the first few ranks are able to fire at any given time.
Yeah.
He orders everyone shoots, and the French, the front of their lines just absolutely crumble. They all fall, and everyone sees this, and this is what it is. It's psychological warfare.
Yeah.
They just saw the entire first wave of the French drop. Everyone looks around, and then they're ordered to fire their volley. They're not in a position to match that intensity of fire.
Mm-hmm.
If they fire their volley, it does little to the English. They know the English are starting to reload, like another volley is coming. What's the average person? What's the average person's reaction? They look around, everyone's dead. They start thinking about turning around. People start backing up, and that's what happens. It slowly happens. People start backing up. The line loses its organization, and it's what's called the beginning of a rout.
Beginning of a rout. And in all human history, 80% of the casualties or more happens once you turn your back to the enemy. Usually in the real combat, you don't see many casualties. It's once you turn your back, they charge upon you, they unleash cavalry. Well, in this circumstance, it's going to be the Scottish Highlanders.
There is no cavalry here.
It's the Highlanders doing their bagpipes again.
But that one volley absolutely decimated, and that was the deciding factor. That first volley
it could have lost Wolfe the entire fight.
Yeah.
It was a glass cannon move, because if the French had accurately realized the situation,
if they had flanked at the same time,
they had any motion, they had anything they wanted to. Yeah. The British were in a defensive stance, but you could have done
the thin red line. If Montcalm had diverted his forces, flanked around, and taken it would absolutely would have.
And for American audiences who like the American Civil War, this is actually common in their warfare. They experimented with a lot of different stuff. There's the thin red line. There's a lot of other things that go on with that. So they kind of understand the concept. But this was revolutionary at the time. It was kind of one of the, not the first time or anything, but it's like, it was a ballsy move. It's unpredictable.
It's only thousands in numbers, but at the time, this is massive for North America.
For North America,
in Europe, they have armies fighting like 20, 30,000 deep.
Yes, and in Prussia, it's fucking insane, for sure.
But for an intense battle like this to be decided from one volley, and then like you're saying, the follow up was the charge from the Scottish Highlands. The French had routed; they had started pulling back to Quebec City, but along the way they had pockets of Canadian militia and Native allies everywhere, and basically acting as snipers and covering that retreat. So the English weren't able to capitalize on the moment and take Quebec City
That
immediately.
doesn't matter though, because it was to protect the bridgehead, and once the bridgehead was
Exactly.
established,
And it was
you're
maintained.
overwhelming numbers. There's a siege of Quebec City. It's over. So
Right,
it was
so
a war of attrition at that point.
Plains of Abraham's decided who commanded
Exactly.
North America, and tragically, the commanders of both sides, General Wolfe and General Montcalm, were both hit during the battle. Wolfe died momentarily after. Like they say, he only survived a few minutes, and he was
He was hit during the
he
volleys,
was hit. He was incoherent. He was out. Like basically, as soon as he was hit, he was out. He lost like all consciousness.
Montcalm didn't have his seatbelt on. His horse was going like, I don't know, 30 miles per
And
hour.
Montcalm was hit as they're starting to retreat.
Yeah. Montcalm took one to the gut, and then he died a
It's
pretty
bled
slow,
out.
agonizing
It was
death.
it was like close to 24 hours later.
And it's not the end of the war, but technically
It goes
it was
on.
a decisive battle.
It goes on technically for another 3 years. Like this is 1959. Quebec City is
1959, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yes.
seven-
you know, 1759. Pardon me. They do take Quebec a little while later. Then the year after that, as all the French resistance moved to Montreal, it takes another year to take Montreal because most of the English forces do pull back at this point to reinforce Europe because the war is more important over there, and they have taken the lead in North America. They do take Montreal in 60, but the treaty is actually technically signed, and because it is the 7 Years' War and it's happening everywhere, the treaty is signed in 62, and that's why they call it the 7 Years' War. The Americans call it the French Indian War. Canada, I don't know where
I'm going to start lobbying. It's going to be called the 4-Year War.
I think
from now
we
on.
just call it like the War of Conquest, something.
Well, for in French, it's
Yeah, I tried answering Justin why it's the 7 Years' War, and he didn't like my answer, and he threw his papers everywhere.
Justin's been very cranky. He's a hostage at the whim of this. Ian was really giddy to do this because he wanted to watch Canada's people's history.
This was a very fun.
And to give you guys an idea on how we honor the memory of this great battle of the Plains of Abraham, that place is now a host to all kinds of open-air music festivals where people get drunk, do drugs, piss, shit, fuck.
I saw
Actually,
Ramstein
there, yeah, Quebec
Piss, shit,
Fest.
fucking puke everywhere, and
It was what was
pretty
it
much,
was 200,000 people there for the Ramstein concert.
Oh, it's fuck.
It's
Okay,
amazing.
I'll try to describe to the audience, like, because I've been to a lot of
Where
I've been-
Canada was decided is where we saw
Exactly.
Ramstein.
I've been to a lot of like decent places for concerts in Canada, and United States, but Plains of Abraham is like it's insane. It's huge. There's a big mound at the back for the losers who want to sit up on the hills and stuff. And fucking Ramstein, Quebec City, it was one of the best shows. And then we saw Ramstein at Montebello, which was really fucking good also. And Offspring, but they're really old at that point. It was a little.
a few people were getting a little old, but
It was a little depressing, but I love Offspring also. But Plains of Abraham's an awesome place to go for a concert. It's really interesting because it's a fucking battlefield.
I love going to Quebec City because they also have the Citadel there, as it's called.
I'm just saying, you go
which
to like
was-
Gettysburg or any of those places,
was
they're
built
not
by
having
the
open air
English.
festivals on there.
I don't know. Maybe they do. I have no idea. Maybe.
I highly doubt
They
it.
do. I mean, they do their own
No,
reenactment.
I don't think they're doing music festivals on.
They just
at
have fat
Gettysburg.
guys in Confederate uniforms doing the old.
Yeah, what would you call it? It's basically like a state park. It's a historical monument, but the whole area is the historical monument. I mean, yes, technically, Plains of Abraham is a historical monument for us Canadians, but yeah,
Not really.
It also is a great venue to have concerts and whatnot. And
So, the moral of the story, Gettysburg, get your shit together. Like, just have concerts out there. Why not?
yeah,
Come on, what's wrong with you fucking guys?
Bring back like an AI, like
Stonewall Jackson.
hologram Abraham Lincoln, Stonewall Jackson. Yeah. Jackson.
No, I don't think he was on Gettysburg. I don't know my American Civil War very well.
Where did he die? It was outside.
I don't know. Hey, you guys can remember.
I don't know. I'm confusing Jackson with Longstreet because Longstreet was actually best friends with General Grant. He was actually General Grant's best man at
Wait,
his
wasn't
wedding.
he the guy that really fucked up at the end?
Longstreet? No, Longstreet was always one of the best
What's the guy with the name? He has like Scythe or something.
conservative.
Yeah.
Conservative? Why am I calling them?
Why are we getting into the American Civil War? Okay,
Actually, I do love the American Civil War. That is a.
but the repercussions of the French Indian War. So Nouvelle-France is no longer under French control; it's given over to the British, so that the French can control 2 little islands for fishing rights and the Caribbean.
Mackinac and well, okay. Actually, fun fact though. So when terms were decided at the treaty, and basically France lost the war badly throughout the world at this point.
Yeah.
And England gave them the ultimatum, like the choice. We will give you back New France or the sugar colonies in the Caribbean. You can't have both. Now, there were only 2,000 colonists in the sugar colonies.
Yeah, it's fucking sad.
And they were close, like 80,000 in New France. And France, without even a second
For
thought,
not even blinking.
They chose the sugar
They're like
colonies because
Quebec, right?
the sugar colonies brought in like 4 times the wealth that New France did.
Yep.
And so whenever we live here in Quebec, and it's je me souviens, this and that, the French abandoned you.
Yep.
They didn't care about you.
And you know what's so funny about all this?
To be fair, we don't like them all that much either.
No, we don't like them. But of all the motherfuckers to come over here after World War II,
Like
French General de Gaulle comes over here with the audacity to start the fucking je me souviens bullshit.
Yeah.
A fucking French prick who... Anyways, I have a lot to say about the French resistance
fuck
movement
him.
in World War II.
The Free French were
Over-glorified babies.
Yeah.
You didn't do
They were
enough.
still useless. Don't get me started about the Vichy French, but the Free French weren't that much better.
The
Don't act like-
Vichy, the Vichy French were Germans as far as I'm concerned.
They
Fuck 'em.
absolutely were.
Fuck them all.
They
But
absolutely
the
were.
Free French, the audacity these people have to come up and be like, oh, we deserve to be at the table at the fucking... No, you didn't. Canada, we got fucked so hard by these
Maybe you
people.
would have been at the table if you didn't let your fleet potentially fall into German hands.
And we're going to get into a tangent about World War II. And France, you deserve everything you get for World War II. Anyways. Yeah. And de Gaulle, to come over and he fucking set... Basically, the entire separatist movement of Quebec is because of this asshole.
The population of New France weren't French. They were Canadian.
They're French. They ate baguettes.
Not according to the French.
Well, not according to Montcalm. They were savages.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. No, the French had no respect for the Canadians.
So,
and yet we're still like...
They still don't, and we hate them too.
and then just to prove a point, if... I didn't even say... I should say this at the beginning. For you Americans or Canadians who are interested, all of Canada's People's History, this propaganda show, it's free on YouTube. We all found out today. You can just look it up.
Don't do it to yourself.
Watch it.
No,
It's not worth it.
actually...
Don't do it.
It really
entertaining.
is entertaining, and if you want to brush up on Canadian history, it starts from the beginning.
Can you imagine telling an American...
Says the guy who was bitching about how inaccurate propaganda it was.
It's
You're
so
like,
accurate.
go ahead,
It's-
watch it.
It's not as inaccurate as it was.
Oh.
It's just changing
It's like saying, the Civil War was not fought for slavery. It was fought for other reasons.
You're basically doing the same thing as saying, cigarettes cause cancer, but smoke them, they're good.
Imagine
That's what you're
yeah,
telling people right now.
what would you call it?
You look cool.
It's not a documentary. It's a
Mockumentary?
no, a dramatic reenactment.
It's dramatic, yeah.
Which are widely available on PBS for American viewers. You have your own.
But the actor
people's history style
shows.
shows.
The actor who plays Benjamin Franklin deserves an Oscar. And this is in a later, actually, yeah. Famous actors are in the series.
Yeah, so the guy who plays Bishop in Aliens, he plays General Isaac Barak.
Yeah, he plays Isaac Barak, yeah.
There's actually a few.
If you watch Stargate Atlantis, McKay, he plays for the Hong Kong episode. I don't know if actually it's part of this series or if it's a different documentary in the 90s. But he plays a vet of Hong Kong. And McKay's I think he's 16 years old in that.
He's the first Canadian casualties in World War II.
He was in a lot of these things. So there's a lot of Canadian actors in this. I don't think Ryan Reynolds was in it though, or anything.
Too young.
Yeah,
Ryan Reynolds is our age.
Mike Myers? No.
Oh, he's gonna play a Scottish Highlander or something?
He's such a fucking prick, that guy. Apparently he's the...
Alright.
No, apparently he's one of the most hostile actors out there. Like, he's an absolute diva. And
Yeah, I've
people-
heard some stuff.
People refuse to work with him.
He hasn't been in shit for a while.
Yeah, because no one wants to work with him.
Well, I mean,
He's
he made
not
his
true.
money.
He played
No,
some random
he's a
general
nightmare.
with a stupid accent in Inglourious Bastards.
That was, what, 10
That's a
years
long
ago?
time ago. Yeah.
And that was
But,
just
yeah,
like a
yeah.
small part?
Man, this got off the rails.
Awesome.
As all of our podcasts.
So, I'll probably put my obnoxious little Patreon shout out at the beginning because I forgot again to do this. But for those of you who are listening on Spotify or wherever the hell you get your podcasts, I do have a Patreon account. It can be found at www.patreon.com/specificwordchannel. You can tell I say this a lot. And over there, you can find exclusive podcasts. As little as $2 gets you access to about 80% of the shit I do over there. So it's not expensive.
Nice.
And we got 18 plus podcasts over there. If you join up, there's polls for what's going to be the next subject. It's not just Pacific War stuff. People have asked me for ancient warfare, medieval warfare, World War II stuff. Even modern history. I'm doing something with like Xi Jinping and stuff right
Nobody
now.
asked for this, though, right?
No one asked for Canadian history. Are you kidding? If you want Canadian
I'm
history,
sorry, listeners.
if you want to put up Canadian history, you can watch as everybody doesn't vote for it. I assure you, no one will, because it's just gonna be boring. But please go check it out. You can actually get a month free if you check it out. A lot of people do. Other than that, you check out Ian over at his YouTube channel.
You can find me over at OnlyFans, Ian _Smith.
There's probably somebody with that name.
Not with my picture.
Okay.
Well, actually, I really got to change it. I realized, like, I'm still using a picture of Ian Smith, Rhodesian Prime Minister, holding a Luger, and like my
on
whole Google.
OnlyFans.
No,
No,
on
on
my
YouTube.
whole Google account. So if I'm sending like professional emails to somebody and they open my email, it's a picture of Ian Smith holding a Luger.
If you're a real fan of mine, please go find Ian Smith on YouTube. It's hard to find his channel. He has like World of Warship videos or something. And put a comment. He'll see it.
I play a lot of World Warships, but lately more Helldivers too. Don't get me started on that.
Oh, Jesus. Other than that, if you want to hear more stuff like this, please, you got to make your voices heard. Obviously, if you're on Spotify or Podbean or whatever, there's no comment section, which
That's
really
unfortunate.
sucks. Yeah, this is the problem with audio.
Because criticism is good.
Yeah, like on
whether
YouTube.
Whether you like it or not, it's like knowing the feedback.
If you want us to stop doing this, please just go over to my YouTube channel and just say something. Or check out the Pacific War Discord. Just join it up and tell me I'm a shithead. Because I want to hear more from you guys, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with the audio podcast. I've been doing a lot of polls lately, and I think the people have spoken. I think I've already made my mind up. But I'm hoping people would like a loose kind of just guys talking shit podcast a little bit on the side. And hopefully this goes somewhere.
Like every podcast ever. Yes.
Because if not, this is getting canceled real quick. We'll see. But yeah, that's been... I guess I'll call it politically incorrect history.
Yeah, we can't call it the 7 Years' War, but it's basically
the 4-year war.
I'm calling it the 7
our
Years'
recount
War.
of the 4 Years' War.
We're going to call it the recount of the 7 Years' War that was actually 4 years, but actually 23.
Okay, sounds perfect.
Over and out.